Chapter 4, Links and More Links. Here and there in the great wilderness, a hardy plant grew, perhaps fireweed or lupine. It seemed to be the only living things around, but it wasn't. Beneath its leaves were ants, ladybugs, aphids, grasshoppers, beetles, spiders, and other small animals. The plant was an island of life, an island of survivors and colonizers. Each kind of life made some other kind possible. The aphids, for example, sucked sap from the plant. Ants fed on the sweet honeydew that aphids give off. Ladybugs ate aphids. Spiders trapped and ate insects and also other spiders. Some meadows and areas of clear-cut forests had groups of plant survivors. With them were animal survivors, white-footed deer mice, and pocket gophers. Insects and spiders had arrived as colonizers. The mice ate seeds and insects. The gophers ate roots and bulbs. But they also did something that helped plants. Gophers spend much of their time tunneling. They dig tunnels as they search for food underground. They dig other tunnels to live in. When digging, a gopher spreads its hind feet wide apart. It digs with its big front feet and claws, sending the loosened dirt back under its body. The dirt piles up behind it. From time to time, the gopher turns and pushes the dirt back along the tunnel. At the mouth of the tunnel, it gives a big shove and flings the dirt out onto the surface. By looking under the leaves of plants, naturalists could learn what small animals were living there. At the mouth of its tunnel, a young pocket gopher shoves out a pile of loosened dirt. These habits make a gopher a pest in a garden. The gopher eats bulbs and roots of plants that people want. It throws out piles of dirt on the lawn. But to natural scientists at Mount St. Helens, the pocket gophers was a small hero. The gophers were tunneling in soil that was now covered with ash and pumice. By shoving soil out of the tunnels, they brought it to the surface. The piles of soil became places where seeds could put down roots and plants could grow. The roots of pearly everlasting and fireweed above attracted a gopher. With its burrowing brought up soil. A gopher mound, like the one seen in the lower right, may serve a place where seeds can put down roots and plants can grow. The soil itself held some seeds, and it held the spores of certain fungi. These are fungi that grow into the roots of plants. Together, the fungi and the roots form a partnership. Fungi take water and mineral from the soil and pass them on to the roots. They do this job much better than roots alone can. In turn, the fungi, which cannot make their own food, take sugars from the plant. The gophers brought both soil and fungus spores to the surface. The spores sprouted, and the fungi formed partnerships with the roots of the plants that grew in the soil. When the plants grew well, their roots served as food for the gophers above ground. The plants became islands of life, places where small animals could live. The seeds of these plants spread and started still more islands of life. Some ants found food in islands of life. Other ants had survived in places where there were no islands. They may have had some food stored underground, but to go on surviving, they needed to find food above ground. For many ants, that food turned out to be fire fungi. The fungi formed huge mats of tangled threads. Some of the mats lasted only a short time. Others grew in places where there was water and also food. bits of wood or other dead matter. These mats lasted for months. They were the only food that ants crawling over the pumice and ash could find. When ants from different colonies met at the mats, scientists saw them fight one another for the food. The fungus mats also served as seed beds for other plants. By the summer of 1981, the fire fungi were gone and mosses were growing in their place. The mosses, in turn, trapped seeds on their rough surfaces. The seeds sprouted and grew into green plants. Green plants are living things that make their own food. So nearly all other forms of life depend on green plants for food. Some take food from the plants. Others eat the eaters of plants. In making their food, green plants take minerals from the soil. In nature, the minerals never get used up because they are recycled. They go back into the soil after animals or plants or parts of plants die. Some of the minerals may be washed out of dead material by rain or melting snow. Most are released as dead material rots or decays. Decay is caused by many small forms of life, such as bacteria, fungi, mites, springtails, beetles, millipedes. Some feed on dead material. Some eat bacteria and fungi, but must eat the dead material to get them. Either way, the dead material is broken down and minerals go back into the soil. On the north side of Mount St. Helens, these small forms of life broke down the remains of animals and plants killed in the eruption. They broke down the droppings of animals. They broke down leaves and stems when plants died back in autumn. Minerals were released and used in new plant growth. A fallen maple is sending up new trees. In time, the trunk will decay and enrich the soil. On this page it says, fire fungi put out thread-like parts that formed mats. The mats served as food for ants and as seed beds for other plants. Even the bodies of insects helped plants grow. Many adult insects have short lives of only days or weeks. Also, as insects grow, they shed their hard outside covering. They molt. On the surface of ash and pumice, scientists could see the molts and dead bodies of insects. They could collect and measure them. They were surprised at the amount of carbon and other minerals in the molts and bodies. They realized that insect bodies have always enriched soil. But as one scientist said, we never even noticed them before because they're so small. Insects and other small animals were food for the first birds that returned. Natural scientists think that all birds on the north side of Mount St. Helens were killed on the morning of May 18th. Later that summer, there were many bird visitors, but at first, only a few kinds of birds could live and breed in the area. Juncos could because they eat insects and make their nests in hollows in the ground. Woodpeckers also found food, and some found dead or broken off trees in which they could make nest holes. It says, these are eggs of a killdeer, one of the ground nesting birds that were able to live and breed in the blast area. Bluebirds were able to find holes in fallen trees for nests. This one is carrying nesting material. Once woodpeckers have raised their young, they desert the nest holes. Deserted woodpecker holes help mountain bluebirds to return. Bluebirds also nest in holes, but they cannot make their own. They must find holes that have formed naturally or that have been made by other animals. Insects are also food for many kinds of fish. Most of these insects spend much of their lives in water. When they hatch from eggs, they do not look like their parents. They go through several stages before they turn into adults. Some, such as mayflies and caddisflies, spend most of their lives going through these stages. The adult live only long enough to mate and lay eggs. Both fish and water insects need oxygen. In many lakes there was little oxygen during the first few years after their eruption. They were filled with trees and bits of plants. Billions upon billions of bacteria and other tiny living things were in the lakes, feeding on these materials and on one another and using up the oxygen. Surviving fish had to live near the surface, where winds stirred the water and added oxygen to it. They did not find much to eat. That first summer, there were two main insect foods for fish. One was a rat-tailed maggot, a young form of horsefly. The tail of this maggot is like a straw and it serves as a breathing tube. In the water with little oxygen, the maggot puts its rat tail and takes oxygen from the air. The second food was the young mosquitoes, which also have breathing tubes. The May 18 eruption wiped out most large forms of life on the north side of Mount St. Helens. The healing of the slopes started with many small forms: bacteria, fungi, hardy weeds and seeds, insects, spiders, pocket gophers. Linked together, they formed a base that made possible the return of other kinds of life. Picture first here. April 1981. Dead trees cover the ground and float in Spirit Lake. A dome has grown in the crater of Mount St. Helens. A scientist scrambles to collect water samples and learn what kinds of life there are in Ryan Lake. In 1980, a wind-blown lupine seed lodged in pumice sprouted and put down roots. As the plant grew, it became an island of life. Its flowers produced seed, which blew away on the wind. By the end of the first summer, some survivors had died, but others were still alive and well. Colonizers had been arriving steadily. Looking up in autumn, scientists saw the air was silver, with seeds and insects blowing in with the wind. Life was coming back to the volcano, as it had many times before. In later summers, wind-blown seeds produced whole colonies of lupine and purely everlasting. Fireweed sprouted through the ash and developed flowers which produced seeds that blew away on their silvery fluff. Exactly 2 years after the big eruption, a plume of steam can be seen rising from the dome growing inside the crater of Mount St. Helens.